and team for helping to organize tonight's event, and each one of you for making some time and being persistent and waiting for us in our delayed flight out of Chicago O'Hare so that we could be with you tonight. As we were just saying to our friends in the overflow room, and let's hear it for them. Hopefully they can hear us. Overflow room, are you there? They're calling in. We are really grateful. There could not be a more important moment to be alive, to be in this country, to be an American, and to have the weight and the responsibility and the opportunity to decide the future of this country in your hands at this moment. So much rests on those who are here right now, especially in the state of Iowa, where you have such a defining and decisive role to play for the rest of the country. And in all of my 18 years, in all of my 18 days on this campaign trail, I have learned that you take this stuff very seriously. Incredibly thoughtful questions, wanting to hold those who wish to hold positions of public trust accountable for their actions, for what they say, for the thought that they put into how they're going to implement these ideas for our country and for one another. And so for that, I am grateful. And as we were reminding the Overflow group upstairs, come summer 2020, we are all going to be on the same team, behind the same nominee, whoever she or he may be. We're going to defeat Donald Trump. Together, Republicans and Democrats and independents, rural and urban, those of you who go back 10 generations or 10,000 years on this continent, and those of you who just showed up 10 days ago. All that will matter going forward, so we're Americans, and we have this opportunity together. Do not allow them to divide us or to define us by our differences. To whom we pray, who it is we love, where we live, none of that stuff matters as much as the fact that we are Americans. Let's decide from this moment going forward, before we are anything else, we are Americans first. You with me on that?
Yeah.
At almost every turn of this country's history, when we have included more people in the success of this country, in the story of this country, we have done better. And we are in an historic opportunity to do that right now, especially given the president that we have seeks to divide us, seeks to play upon these differences, exacerbate the divisions that already exist in this country. Folks who've had power have been able to keep their purchase on power at the expense of powerless. It's the story of human civilization for as long as there has been one. And they use our differences to keep us apart, or to make us angry, or to make us afraid of one another or of ourselves. And as those powerful men and women, corporations in this country, gain more power, they use this system against the rest of us. Unrestrained money and influence that buys outcomes as well as access, invites the cynicism and the distrust and the disengagement of millions of our fellow who see their government owned by those who have the power to purchase it. We run the risk of becoming a democracy in name only, as the safeguards of our institutions are used by the powerful to manipulate the process. Members of Congress choosing their own voters, not the other way around. The Supreme Court deciding that corporations are people and money is speech. PACs and special interests buying legislation and elections wholesale. Voting rights not being expanded, but being withdrawn. Now, the only answer to this is a vigorous, and I mean a powerful democracy. But it must be both a political democracy and an economic democracy. Every single one of us, every child, every man, every woman, must be able to see a future for themselves in this country, or this country will have no future as a democracy. inertia of power that we see, the only way to break up the unprecedented concentration of power and wealth and privilege that we see in America today, that we have not seen, unless you were alive 120 years ago during the last Gilded Age. In the same way that that moment provoked a progressive response, so too do I believe in this country at this moment. And that we're going to find a way to come together to break up the power where it is held right now and return it back to people. It will require reforms in our democracy. It means a new Voting Rights Act signed into law. It means that we have same-day and automatic voter registration in every single part of the country, so every single one of us can vote. It means that we end gerrymandering in this country. And we get big, unaccountable money out of our politics. That's why we don't take any of that money in this campaign. But you cannot have a full political democracy, one of those bold progressives from more than 100 years ago, Teddy Roosevelt told us, unless you have something approaching an economic democracy in this country. That means that one job should be enough for every single American who works full-time, to be able to raise their families, to pay the note on the mortgage, to put food in front of them, and to be well enough to return to work the next day. It means that we should win that fight for 15 at a minimum for every single one of us, and especially those school teachers and educators who in Iowa and it means that after all of the sacrifice of those educators, when that child is 18 years old, that he or she is both college ready to go on to debt-free higher education and career ready to go work a job that they're trained for, that provides purpose and function in their lives and allows them to work near or where they live right now and pays a real paycheck. That means investing not just in higher education, but strengthening, not diminishing, the power of unions in this country, ensuring every single American sees a path that they so choose to an apprenticeship that will allow them to learn a skill or a trade that will then allow them to command a living wage for the rest of their lives. It's missing in too many parts of America right now. Now, these are investments. They are investments that will produce a return over the lifetime of the beneficiary, not just that student now able to afford to go to Iowa State, but not just their family, but this community where they come back home to, that education that they will drive back in to the success of their hometown, or their state, or their country. When we invest in one another, when we include more people into the process, this country is better. Here's a great opportunity for us. Economic, social, and otherwise. There are more than 1 million dreamers in the United States of America, most of whom came to this country at a very tender age. English may be the only language they speak, and yet those 1 million of our fellow Americans, who are just as American in any way that matters to me as anyone else in this room, they're not just the students in the classroom, which is the way that a lot of us like to think about dreamers. They're very often the teachers in the classroom. They're not just benefiting from those who have their lives on the line tonight in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Somalia, in Yemen, in Libya, in a world halfway across the world. They are those who are serving right now, bearing the battle for the rest of us. So what if we decided that instead of deporting them back to a country they do not know, whose language they do not speak, where they may not have any relatives, and if against those long odds they are successful and they will be successful for that place, we free them forever of any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens right here in this country. In terms of bringing people in, what if in a country, which also happens to be the wealthiest and the most powerful on the face of the planet, the most powerful world history has ever known, where there are people in 2019 dying of diabetes, of the flu, of curable cancers, where we have a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for women of color. We have a crisis in infant mortality. The divide between infant mortality in Black America and white America today is greater than it was in 1850, 15 years before the end of slavery. Now, if your conscience does not call you to do the right thing, then perhaps our self-interest will. When millions of our fellow Americans cannot see a doctor, take their child to a therapist, afford their prescriptions, they are not well enough to go to school, or to raise their families, or to work a job, or to start a business, or to keep that family farm from their parents and invest in their community. They're not well enough to write a poem, or create a piece of art, or start a punk rock band and tour the country, that I was able to do when I was 18 years old. And we all lose out on the potential that is never realized. On that young man that I met in Laredo, Texas, 27 years old, has glaucoma and diabetes, has seen a doctor once in his life, and that doctor told him that he would be lucky to see the age of 40. And what we know is that not only do we lose out on everything he was supposed to do in his life, the very reason that God put him on the planet in the first place, every day that he doesn't live past 40. But as he gets closer to death, and begins to show up at the emergency room more and more often with no ability whatsoever to pay the bill. You will pay the bill. I will pay the bill. If you're lucky enough to have insurance in the first place, if you're lucky enough to be able to pay taxes in this country in the first place. Universal, guaranteed, high-quality healthcare may be expensive, but it's a lot less expensive than the way that we fail to pay for healthcare in this country. In a country that is needlessly losing lives in this way, universal has to mean everyone has access to a primary care provider. In a country where the county jail system is one of the largest providers of mental health care services today, people throwing a chair through the window of this place or their home in order to get arrested on purpose to treat their schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or depression. You ask the sheriff's deputies and the police officers who have to arrest these men and women because they have no place to go other than the jail to be fed, to be housed, to be clothed, to be prescribed the psychotropic medications that for a little while at least make life bearable for them. And again, the moral imperative calls us to do the right thing while we have the capacity to do so. But in Houston, Texas, at least, it costs us $110 a night. Keep someone locked up for mental health care. Fracture that cost, you take care of them consistently or preventatively, and free them to do whatever they're supposed to do in their lives. So universal health care also means mental health care for every single one of our fellow Americans. And that maternal mortality crisis that I just described, that is claiming the lives of so many women in this country, especially women of color. It is especially bad in the state of Texas, where we have closed more than a quarter of our family planning clinics, making it so hard for women to get a cervical cancer screening, family planning help, or just to see a provider of any kind at all. And we are losing it. And so universal health care also means every woman makes her own decisions about her own life. I think about, especially because there are some younger people in this room today. Some who are in college, some who may be in the second grade, first, kindergarten, okay, first. And you know, so often people in my position, a little bit older, I'll be 47 in September of this year, are 47. We're tempted to say, and it can sound patronizing because it is, you know, you're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. You can't wait to see what you do. The truth of it is, and you all know this as well as I do, because you're leading it right now, that you're the leaders of this moment, and you always have been. When we look back to our most heroic moments in this country's history, we think about those who stormed the beaches at Normandy. They're 17, 18, 19 years old. risking and losing their lives for this country and to make the world safe for democracy, and they did. When we think about those who rode those Greyhound buses through the Deep South, taking their lives into their hands, those who sat at the lunch counter in Greensboro or Rock Hill, South Carolina, or across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, those who lost their lives in the pursuit of civil rights, not for some, and not only for those who look like them, but for all of us, so that everybody can contribute to your full potential. They've always been distinguished, not just by their leadership, but by their youth, perhaps because they understand better than anyone else that they will bear the consequences of the current policies unless they change them, sometimes by forcing the conscience of this country. So we thank Lyndon Baines Johnson, my fellow Texan, for the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. But really, truth be told, the credit goes to those who forced him, and the members of Congress at the time who voted for it, to do the right thing. And so when it comes to climate right now, we know, if we still listen to the scientists, that this planet has warmed 1 degree Celsius just since 1980 over pre-industrial revolution levels. And the fires that we see in California, the 58 inches of rain that fell from the sky on Houston, Texas, which is the landfall record for as long as we've been keeping them in North America, and it happened just in 2017. And by the way, it was the third 500-year flood in 5 years in that one city. They should be good for 1,500 years, but they're not. The droughts through which our farmers in the Panhandle in Texas, and maybe some here in Iowa, have persisted in order to grow the food and the fiber that feeds and clothes not just this country, but really so much of the rest of the world. All of that is going to be much worse, more frequent, more profound, more persistent, more devastating. The lives that we have already lost to climate change are nothing compared to the lives that we will going forward. If you're worried about 400,000 apprehensions on our southern border, and by the way, that compares to 1.6 million apprehensions in the second year of the George W. Bush administration. But if you're worried about the apprehensions we have today, imagine what it will be like when there are some countries in this hemisphere that can no longer sustain human life. And that's exactly the course that we're on today. But here's our chance. Those same scientists who tell us these fires and droughts and floods and storms are in part a result of our own excesses, our own emissions, and our own inaction. Give us 10 years within which to work together to save ourselves, the planet, and those who will succeed us. The very youngest among us in this room, and those not yet alive on this planet. It's going to take something just short of a miracle, but it's going to take something that only the United States can do. This democracy that I began my conversation with is the most ingenious mechanism yet devised by humankind to call forth the power, the creativity, and the potential of a people. It's exactly what we did to face the Nazi threat, the existential threat to Western democracies in 1941. It's exactly what we did to lift millions out of the Great Depression and build the largest middle class the world had yet seen. And it is exactly what we need to do now to free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, greenhouse gas emissions, invest in the jobs and technologies of renewable energy that will allow us to meet our obligation and allow this country once again to claim its status as the indispensable nation in the world, leading by example and convening the other countries of the planet to do their part. It's the only way that we will make it. I don't know what the odds are of us being able to accomplish it, but I know that it absolutely has to start now in this room, right here on the inside. So, no pressure, but this one's on us. And we've got to be a match for the moment. We cannot leave the people of the future looking back on us in judgment, as they will. And that's why I'm here. 12-year-old Ulysses, back in El Paso, with his sister Molly, who's 10, their little brother Henry, 8 years old. They will look back on this moment in 2050 Ulysses won't even yet be my age. And they'll either be proud as hell of what we decided to do. We put our differences behind us. Republicans and Democrats joined together to do the right thing for the future of this country. Or they will condemn us for what we failed to do while we still had the chance. And it includes everything that we are talking about, everything that we want to do. Because 243 years into this experiment, we're all created equal to equal opportunity. No one is above or below the law. And we're the example for the rest of the planet. As Lincoln said, the last best hope of Earth. There's nothing that guarantees us another 243 or even another year of this experiment or this idea, but are we to secure the nomination? That's what I want to do. Not just to defeat Donald Trump in November of 2020, although that's critically important to our prospects. To ensure that we all come together as a country, maybe even bigger than a movement, to be able to accomplish our priorities, to be defined not by our differences or the smallness or the pettiness of this moment. Don't watch cable TV or go on Twitter. We want to be known by our ambitions and our aspirations and the creativity and the ingenuity and the sacrifice and the service that we're willing to bring to bear to achieve them. That's what we're here to do, and that's why I'm grateful to run to serve you as President of the United States of America.